Welcome all to the Lofi Podcast. Today we have Cucamello back with us to talk a little bit about developments sort of in AI and AI in the music scene as well. So thank you so much for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here. It's been a while, so happy to catch up again.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, you've done such a great job alongside Saint Rumi, Jay Fletch, and Sphere of Hip Hop and The Collective as well. Since we did our episode, that's become a thing. And then you invited me to come with the podcast to be affiliated with you guys. And it's been an amazing journey. So thank you as well for your support.
Yeah, thanks for being part of it. It's been amazing. I think we've just celebrated our first year, both as a collective and for Beachy Records, and having you as part of it. It's been incredible. We've worked with hundreds of artists, lots of editorial placements, sync placements with Sphere of Hip Hop. We couldn't thank the community enough. I think it's grown quicker and faster than any of us expected. So really happy.
Yeah, it is. It is absolutely amazing to see. And we can only hope for the future for it to continue to grow as well. So yes, before we get started talking about AI and how it's affecting the music scene at the moment, would you mind giving us a little update on yourself, how life has been, how Lo-Fi has been, and I know you've recently had a new addition to the Cucamello household, so...
Yeah, so we recently welcomed my new daughter, so I now have a newborn and a 3-year-old to look after. So anyone in the Lo-Fi community and part of our Discord will know this. So there's been I think there's a slowdown this year in Cucamello releases. So there is stuff coming. So I have an EP I'm waiting for a date on, which I'm very excited about, with this very exciting label I can't talk about, but it's quite big for me. And then I also have an album in the works, which I'll be putting out either self-release or on Beachy Records. So excited for both of those to drop. But it has been, I think, a slowdown for Cucamello. But that was a conscious decision. So with a baby coming, I focused on the label and the collective. So we didn't take a break over the whole year for that. So it's continued to grow. Just hit 200 releases with Beachy Records now. So yes, really happy with how the label's growing, and I think it was right to focus on any artist that trusted us with their music. I felt like that was the priority while I took some time off, but I'm looking forward to, especially in September, getting back on it and making some more music.
Yeah, that is absolutely fantastic to hear. And even hearing you mention about your daughter being born and learning to sort of prioritize things, it's reminded me of the last episode of the podcast I did with Larkwood Falls, and he was mentioning how sometimes we need to remember that family comes first, and it's going back to show that even though we have our music side, that we're all human beings, we all have our own personal lives, and it's sometimes very hard to balance.
He has a lot more children. He has a lot more children than I do. So I'm amazed I'm amazing who finds any time for music at all, to be honest. But I think it's something that often goes unsaid in the lo-fi community is we have quite an age range. It's not a genre where everybody's either young or old. It's quite the spectrum, and there's quite a lot of dads. So I don't think dads talk to each other that much out in the real world, but I think a lot of us have connected through lo-fi. I think a lot of people have almost returned because it's a genre you can make at home. You don't have to be touring. So a lot of us were in touring bands, played lots of live gigs. It's something we can do with our limited time and still produce and be part of a community and make music. And I think that's something that's really special about lo-fi as general.
Yeah, it's great. And then as well as that, you can always share life advice too from some of the older producers, and especially with new dads as well, giving them tips. So, yeah. And so now getting into our subject with this episode, I think a lot of people might ask about the AI scene. And AI in music and us in the lo-fi community, why should we be aware of this? I mean, a lot of people might just hear things on the news or see things in social media, but just, brush it by and not take into consideration the implications of what's been written there. Maybe could you shed some light on why we should know more about this and take action?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. So when we met, I think it was 18 months ago now, when we first talked about AI, I don't think anybody was really talking about it. So I think there was a few people in depth in music communities or artists who were talking about it. But I think the podcast that we did last was the first time I'd seen sort of a public view. I think it's really interesting how that's changed. So in the last few months, especially, it's ramped up. I'm seeing major labels, big industries, creatives with a big platform now talking about it openly. And it's really interesting to see how the conversation has moved on. And I think it's really good that people are having that conversation. I think before it was almost people didn't understand. We didn't know how these tools worked. We didn't know how AI was created, what it was trained on. I think we now have a better idea of that. I think what's happening now is that we're seeing that the artists and music community are far more informed. Most of the artists I talk to especially are far more informed about AI and are having those discussions. I think it's having those discussions now more on a platform to the public and to our audience, which is going to be the next step. So I think some people are tuned in. If you look at the general public, so somebody doesn't create art, are tuned into that it exists, but they might not know the implications, the impact, how that was created. So I think it's almost our job, and anybody who does have a platform's job, to inform people. I don't think we should be pointing fingers and telling people what they should be doing, but I think we should be informing people so they can make an informed choice. Personally, I feel like, and I think we said this last time, art should be created by humans. It's about human expression, and your lived experiences is translating to create something that is art. And I think people now, especially not just with AI, but just algorithms on the internet, people are getting more disconnected and craving that human connection more. So we especially see this with people like switching off, going to analog, like dumb phones, things like that. I think people are going to be craving that human interaction. And I think us as artists, I think it's our job to communicate to people why it's important, what our story is. But then when we talk about AI, talk about why we feel it is impacting us and our livelihoods. So be that, I think we'll get onto this, but why, how it is trained, how it is created. The fact that these things aren't just harmless interactions. There's a real human cost from using AI. So be that the fact that it was created on data that wasn't owned by them. So if anybody in the Lofi community has seen, you can now search and see how many of your tracks have been used by Suno to train their models. So a number of my tracks have been taken and used on there, which I'm not happy with. They're copyrighted. I own them. They shouldn't be doing that. But then there's also the climate change and the impact of like water reserves. I think a really interesting comparison for that is the UK and Ireland, actually. So in the UK, the government has signed off to build more data centres by 2030 than we actually have the water capacity for. So the water for their cooling, we literally don't have enough water to meet the requirements of just the data centres they want to build by 2030. And they haven't taken that into account in their planning. So that's now under review. Ireland's an interesting case because I think it's got the largest energy consumption per capita for AI data centres in the world. So the Irish government is actively subsidising the costs of electricity usage and water usage by AI companies. So they pay significantly less than the population. Also, a significant proportion of your electricity as a whole is now being used just to power AI data centres. And this just seems at odds with us as human beings. That shouldn't be the main focus. So I think there's a discussion to be had. I think it's happening in the artistic scene, and I think we now need to have that more with the general public. I know for sure that, say, my parents won't know that that's AI slop that they're seeing on Facebook everywhere. Whereas I think like my wife has now started noticing it and being like, why do they all look the same? And, oh, that's why.
Yeah. Wow, I wasn't aware at all of what you mentioned in regard to the Irish government almost subsidising these companies in order to run the data centres. And Yeah,
So the cost per usage for electricity, I don't know the exact figures off the top of my head, but the amount that you would pay as an individual running your house for a kilowatt per hour is like 3 or 4 times higher than they will pay for the same, which is just outrageous.
Yeah, it is utterly ridiculous. I mean, wow, it's disgusting to even hear that. It's, I mean, even talking with you on this podcast, yeah, it's difficult to keep my cool hearing that. And I suppose, as you say, it's a little bit of an archaic analogy, but it's almost like the watchman in the watchtower, and he's looking out, and like that's almost us in this community where we're more aware of this and how it affects us directly. And if we don't tell the people who are less aware, less, I don't know if tuned in is the right term to use, around this scene about what's happening, it's almost as if the responsibility falls on us. But if we're able to tell them and we're able to inform them, then at least we know that we've done what's morally right and we've given them the opportunity to respond.
I think this is going to be an ongoing discussion for years and years to come, especially around the morals and ethics of it. Arguments I often see like pushed back are people talking about that everything's AI now, which in some respects there is a lot of AI embedded. I think most of us are really sick of seeing like AI chatbots that don't help you pop up in everything. Like I don't know why WhatsApp needs an AI. I don't need AI to just ask my friends and family what they want to do tonight. I don't understand why that needs to be embedded. But I think what we need to do is push back against it being pushed into everything, but there also needs to be a discussion about how we use it and why we use it. So there is differences in types of AI. More intelligent people than me will know the intricacies in and out of that. I generally lump it into there's assistive AI. So if it's something like some people argue, oh, but spell check is AI. Yes, that's an assistive. It's not generative. It's not created off work stolen from other people. There is a difference between these, but I think the differences are blurred. It's not a simple line. It's sort of grey, muddy area. And I think those discussions need to have about how it's created and what it's used for. So using AI with ethically trained data to cure cancer is one thing I often see people push back at. I was like, yes, that is done. I work in universities, so I've seen this firsthand. That's ethical data that they have got ethically, and it has been used to solve a problem that affects all of humanity. That's good. We can still be against generative AI being used in the creative arts and say that AI can be used in a positive way. And I think we can't just say all is bad, but on the other side, the argument that I often see for AI usage in the creative arts is that it can be used elsewhere for good. They can both be true. You can have positive use of data. And we've had sort of large language learning models and like more broadly machine learning for 15 or more years. It's not new. But what we have seen in the last 2 years, especially, is generative AI and the fact that it is taking people's intellectual property that should be copyrighted, and that has been used at scale to almost create industries to replace us, which is morally wrong. But then the vast speed at which that is happening is having an impact on the climate. So lots of these data centers, yes, we needed data centers before. They existed to run parts of the internet. That's fine. But the vast scale we're seeing now is insane.
Yeah. And like, I do have to agree that like I do use assistive AI quite a bit. Like in terms of, I'm in the middle of college at the moment. I'm in the middle of academia. And I find it as a fantastic tool for helping to find research papers that are, related to what I'm currently studying. But then, like, you find individuals who are using it to generative AI for cheating in academia. I'm sure that you're well aware of that with your field of work. And so it's always the case of that. It's ridiculous where I got the quote from, but it's always stuck with me whenever I played Modern Warfare 2 as a child. And on the death screen, there was a quote that said, all technology is, what is it? I can't remember the exact quote, but the gist of it was that there is no moral technology until it's applied. and that it's neutral, it's morally neutral until applied. And I think that's very much the case with AI. It depends on where you're using it and how you're using it and what impacts there are from you using it. And that's definitely something we'll get into.
And I think academia is a really interesting one. So the universities where I've worked, we do see more people cheating, generating. You can pick that up. Come on, guys. There's things to check with that. You will get caught and you will get held up about that. So don't be stupid. Don't do that. I think we are seeing there's interesting research studies coming out, sort of from the scientific community around how it is impacting us and learning. And I think I do have concerns about that, especially when I think of my daughters. So it's been shown that there's cognitive atrophy. So that is people that use AI repeatedly for tasks that they otherwise wouldn't have, lose those skills. And this happens with lots of things. So if you stop doing something for a long time, you lose those skills because you're not cognitively reinforcing that learning. And that can happen with AI. And I think people need to be careful of how they do that. I think it can be useful. But there's also other studies that show that AI is wrong 70% of the time, which means you have to check if you are using it. Check what you're doing. And I think I do see this with people, because I've seen AI, and especially like Claude and ChatGPT and things, hallucinate references. So they put references for things don't exist, or they'll put a reference for an argument that actually, once you read the reference, will actually argue the opposite. And I think intelligent people will always question that, and they'll use it as a tool that can help them. And you can then go and read your references and check on that data. And that's fine. That's going to happen. I think it's when people just pass it all off to these things, we'll see a decline in like cognitive ability.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I like an example with myself in terms of academia when I was looking for references in regard to a lab that I was working at, because I'm studying bioscience. And so I was looking at the efficacy of certain antibiotics on types of bacteria species. So I thought I'll look it up on GPT. Is there any studies that show that this specific antibiotic is effective against the bacteria that I'm studying? And it said, yes, here you go. There's a couple of papers. So I flick through them, and whenever I go to the conclusion at the end, it's the complete opposite, and it says that it does not work. And if I had just copied and pasted that straight into my report, like, as you say, you can clearly tell that this AI was used because you haven't read anything that you put in there.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
And it's sad to see that so many people are just doing this, and as you mentioned, don't understand the implications of how this is going to negatively affect their own critical thinking skills.
Yeah, and I think that is a concern. And I actually think younger generations are going to be more clued into this. I think I already see, especially students, questioning more. I think it's almost, I don't want to say an older generation, but I do see my parents just accepting it almost. It's just, ChatGPT said so. That's not a valid reference. And I think we'll see this more in other fields, is where it has to go through a human. Whatever level AI gets to in the future, irrelevant of however good it gets, everything should be checked by a human, especially if it's decision-making, important things. Everything has to have that human check at the end.
Yep, I entirely agree. And so one of the AIs that we mentioned that I'm sure everyone in the music scene has heard of is Suno. And it's definitely the most well-known AI tool in the music scene. And so one of the questions I have here written is if you can inform us a little bit about the hack that happened and the exposure of their fair use defense that really isn't the case.
Yeah. So this is really interesting. So this was, for anybody, we're recording this beginning of August. So only 3 weeks ago, there was a hack of Suno. So up until now, Suno, Udio, and a bunch of the other generative AI music software and also the visual softwares have sort of gone under the idea that it's fair use. So all of the training data that they gathered to put into their models was fair use. And by fair use, they were arguing, I think this is more based on the US understanding, like the US legal understanding of fair use of it's in the public domain, I can use it in my whatever. So as far as I understand it from fair use, legally what it's actually meant to do is if you're, say, a news website, so you're quoting something, or if you're writing a critical review, you can use excerpts, small parts of somebody else's work for that review. It's things like that. That's what fair use is roughly meant to do. They were arguing that for basically taking everybody's work, copying it, and training their models. I think most people in the creative industries immediately were like, we don't think that's fair use. But what this hack has exposed, which is really interesting, is the actual methods in which Suno got the data. So the fair use argument they had before was that it's all generally available on the internet. This hack showed that that's not actually what they did. So it shows them systematically getting past, specifically YouTube and a number of others, but going past the protections. So YouTube has protections in place so you can't scrape all of the data. So they used a third-party interim between them to bypass those security procedures, which goes against their terms of use and terms of service, in order to access that data and then to scrape it en masse. So this wasn't stuff that was publicly available. It wasn't free to use on the internet. They were actively going against the terms of use and terms of service in order to get to that data. So that completely destroys their fair use. It's available, it's there for everyone. And something actually that's happened in the last couple of days is this has been backed up again. So we'd seen it with literature. So we'd seen some researchers with, I think it was a ChatGPT, actually being able to recreate almost entire books or passages. So one team of researchers, I think, created Harry Potter. I think 80% of Harry Potter almost word for word using the software. And this same thing has happened in Germany now. So where Suno are being sued in Germany, they've actually proven that they can recreate entire songs. I think there are 6 copyrighted songs in the German Suno case, which could be entirely recreated. So the other argument they had, as well as the fair use, was that they weren't storing this data, that it was trained on it and then it was effectively gone, and that you couldn't recreate copyrighted work from it. So in 2 different instances, 2 different models now have been shown that they can recreate copyrighted work almost like for like. And the Suno case specifically showed which those works were. So I think there's a Bruno Mars song and a couple of others. They were completely able to recreate those. So it showed that the model had retained the information of that track, which again breaches copyright. So I think that the case which they had, which they were trying to push forward and was the sort of the forefront of all of their litigation, is just crumbling beneath them. Like, they clearly scraped the data. They clearly went around protection to get to that data, knowing that they shouldn't be doing it. And they do store this data. They've stored it, copied it, reproduced it. We've seen the same with Meta. So there was a large archive of academic research stolen. So if you were at a university or work at a university, essentially all research was stolen. There's a big cache of it that was sold on the dark web. Meta bought it and have access to it, and that's the one that's going against them. And that's been used in a bunch of other cases as well. So this is all copyrighted material, protected material. They've gone to extra lengths to get past protections, illegally obtaining the information and then copying, reproducing and sharing, which breaks all of the copyright laws. So I'm really interested to see how this progresses. So my expectation is that they're going to try and fight back. They'll do a counter to the case. Interesting to see if it extends beyond Germany. So what other countries start doing the same. We're already seeing litigation, I think, in the EU is doing a lot, and various EU companies, but also Brazil are doing a lot to protect their artists and taking on these companies. And I do think in the next 6 months, we're going to see a large amount of litigation, because it's just disintegrated. Their entire premise of protection has just gone.
Yeah. I wasn't aware at all of this case in Germany, but I do remember seeing a video of a guy reproducing Chuck Berry's Johnny B. Good through Suno almost perfectly. And he said that even if it wasn't producing Johnny B. Good, that the lyrics would often take the phrase "Go Johnny Go" and just put it into his prompts, clearly showing that they have stored those specific line of words to put in sort of this old rock music. And so, yeah, as you say, it goes clearly against what they've said and what they've made us believe, and that they haven't stored anything. And that if the models are able to do this, there obviously is some records of what it's been trained on being kept in the system.
And I'm interested to see. So some of the legal litigation going on now is actually suggesting that they shouldn't be able to even do that. So some of the prompts that they used for these were like create music in the style of Cucamello, for example. Some people are suggesting that shouldn't be allowed. So you shouldn't be able to create something like, you could have generic terms such as like country lo-fi, but trying to make ones in the style of specific artists shouldn't be allowed. And I think that's a good way. One thing I do think about the Germany case specifically is I personally don't think it goes far enough. So the court's ruling was that they have to pay out a large amount of money to all of those whose copyright was infringed. Good. So they should. But it doesn't go as far as I would expect, in the fact that I feel like if you train something on like illegally obtained data, you should have to destroy what you trained on it. You can go back to square one and you have to retrain whatever you've built based on material that you legally have available. So there are some like AI sites where they've asked producers to create tracks. I think a bunch of distributors now are letting you opt in if you want to. I mean, come on, guys, don't do that. That's a terrible idea. Don't say yes to that. They're offering you peanuts to take away your work. I think that's terrible, but they are offering like a legitimate way to train their models. So you sign up knowing full well that your track has been handed off to train this. I think some of them it's like a $5 like almost like a advance that you get, and then you'd get like peanut royalties. We're talking nothing. If you want to do that, that's up to you, but at least you've like consciously made the decision to do that. I think if these models are going to exist in the future, that's the way that they need to do it. You can't just be going and taking the copyrighted work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like as you say, I personally would never opt into such a thing, but at least giving the artist a choice and the option to do so if they so wished, it's far more, what's the word? Sorry, English is failing me during this interview for some reason.
I think it's far more ethical.
Ethical, that's the term. Yes.
Yeah, but I thought it's also more transparent. So I think when these tools first existed, I think like, let's be fair, most people used. I don't think most musicians used the music side because we were like, no, but I think most used sort of image creation software at some point because we didn't know that. We just thought, like, my assumption personally was that they had used like freely available or legally obtained data to train the models. I didn't know how they worked. I didn't know how they got that information. That's clearly not the case now. I think if they are legally trained, personally, it's got to a point where I wouldn't want to use them. But if it's like transparently, legally trained on like valid data and people still want to use it, it's much harder to argue against that. I think the end user still has to be informed. So that's another thing that came up this week. So I think yesterday or the day before, the EU passed or put into place a law that says that all AI created imaging material has to be like stamped as such, so that the end user knows what they're consuming. And I think if it's going, like, I don't think we're going to stop it from existing. I think that would be nice, but I think that's very unlikely. But if it's legally trained and it's stamped so that the people who help produce it are compensated and informed, and that the end user is informed about what they're viewing, I think, fine, it can exist. I don't like it, but at least that's not completely ethically disgusting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's giving it a level of transparency that there wasn't before. And I think sometimes it's a case where we might be better celebrating in the small baby steps. And hopefully in the future, as things go on, they might get more clear, and even like it might be a bit wishful, but saying that there's large restrictions placed on generative AI. But I suppose it's only something that we can see how it pans out in time, and none of us know the future.
I think I would like to see restrictions, but I think the restrictions should be, I think people are going to want to play with these things. I think the restrictions can also be dangerous, but I think they should definitely come in where they protect individuals, protect people. So the case with Meta, with X and Grok and creating indecent images of people, 100%. That's outrageous that you could even argue against that. Like children and individuals should be protected. That's no question. But I think there should also be around anything that's misleading to the public. So we've seen it a lot in politics, especially in the UK and the US, of people just using doctored images to try and argue their point. Like, if you're going to do it for fun, that's one thing, but trying to like manipulate populations is wild, and that I think is a clear-cut case of where there should be some like legal grounds to stop this, which doesn't currently exist.
Yeah, and I think it's the case as with many things. The context and the use case really matters, and I think like AI is being used as something that's fun, something as like almost as a toy for people to produce images or produce silly songs. I can understand the sentiment behind it, whereas, you're a teenager, it's a bit of fun. But I think whenever we begin to look a little more into environmental impact and things like that, you really have to consider and have second thoughts before you hit prompt on anything. So, the day that we're recording this interview is the 5th of August, 2026. And so this morning in the Alt Jazz Collective Discord server, I noticed you put a little announcement out in regards to the policy with AI use and so on. And one thing that caught my eye was hybrid AI that you mentioned, and how there would be no tolerance of that in any of the submissions. And I thought, well, that's in fact one of the subjects that we're going to be covering in this little podcast episode. And so, like we can see like a lot of clearly talented musicians sort of almost beginning to use AI. They're warming up to it, using it to finish a track using Suno, or there's certain elements that they're feeling maybe a little uninspired, and they decide that, you know what, I'm going to stick this through some AI tool and make and finish this track. What are your thoughts about this? And can you tell us a little bit more about what's happening in this whole scene?
Yeah. So from a label perspective, one of the reasons we decided to put out that announcement was mostly that we are just seeing more of it. So about a year ago, what we used to see was people trying to get away with submitting to labels. And I think labels get quite a lot, but if you're a playlister or a curator, you'll get even more. You get inundated. But about a year ago, it was largely you'd either get human-made music or you'd get purely AI music. So where somebody had put a prompt in and entirely generated a track from Suno or Udio or a similar site. We've almost been clear as a label for Beat Tree Records and as a Alt Jazz Collective that we're not interested in AI music. We felt the need now to tighten up how we define that. We've never wanted any melodic elements or any type of AI in the tracks that we release, but we are seeing more and more people try and submit what we would class as, say, hybrid AI tracks. So we felt it was right for us and our community to state that clearly, that that's something that we're not interested in supporting, but we are seeing more of it. So I think a lot of people may not be aware of how this is being used, and I'd put it into two camps. So there's people using it almost. They say they're a musician, they play guitar, for example, but don't play other instruments. So you might see people generate basically a whole track and then play guitar over the top of it. That's not something we're interested in. That would what I would class under the hybrid. You'll also see people just generating certain elements. So maybe you've got a track, as you said, and you feel it needs more ear candy or it's lacking in some respect. So you'll use something like Suno to add elements to it. This is where you're adding stems, adding musical elements, but there's still a human creation as part of it. And that's a majority of what we'd see as hybrid AI. We're clear that we're not interested in that. Personally, not speaking for the collective, but I would rather hear your terrible pads or keys or ear candy. I'd rather hear you scratching at a microphone, doing something creative, like literally anything other than prompting that extra element. I think we listen to enough of them that we can hear a lot of it ourselves. Saint Rumi is really, really good at this. So you can hear sort of the digital artifacts. You can hear when it's created by AI. It's going to get better, and at some point we're not going to be able to tell. But we're not interested in supporting that. We want wholly, fully made human creations. The other side of hybrid that we're also seeing, and I think this is a legal area that people aren't fully aware of, is people using AI to finish tracks. So they'll have created a demo. So maybe you'll have recorded most of a beat or maybe half of a track or something, and you use AI to fill elements, extend the track, master it, mix it, and like tidy up the package. That's also something that we're not interested in releasing. So irrelevant of how we feel and the fact that we want human-made music for our releases, that's what we're passionate about, that's what we want to support. There's also legal implications for those. So if you create an AI-generated beat, we discussed this in our last podcast, you don't own that output. If you're on the free tier of Suno, you can't even distribute it. If you've paid, you then have a license to distribute it, but they still retain rights over it. They can still use it, create copies, derivatives, which means like your song could essentially end up being placed in a sync license, for example, and you would get no royalties because they own the derivatives of that. So that's the legal side of a wholly generated, which I think people have become clearer of. But if you upload your track to Suno, if you're creating, say, an element, if you're creating just create some pads in this key signature with these chords, nobody owns that bit, and by law, you'd own the composition of your bit, but not that element. And that's sort of a grey area. But as soon as you upload your track, so say you create a demo, you upload that track to Suno, you're giving them the same rights. So you retain your rights to that original copy, as in you are the person who wrote it, but as soon as you upload it, they can create derivatives. So although you were the original composer, they can now reproduce that track without giving you anything. So you've essentially given away a large chunk of your potential royalties, but you've done all of that hard work, created a composition, and yes, it's finished it, and you may like that, but you've signed away your legal rights. So even if we were happy with that, that puts labels in a difficult position of you cannot sign a contract with us because in our contracts it states that you must have the legal rights wholly to all of your track. So when people use samples, there'll be sample licenses and things like that. And like on Splice, you can create, you can get all the licenses from the samples that you get from Splice to pass onto labels that not all labels will accept samples, but the ones that do. And that's a way to do it. It takes a lot of time and effort to clear all of that. But with Suno and things like that, if you upload your track, you've given it away. You can still submit your tracks and release them, but you don't own the full rights. Somebody else can create derivative works of what you created. And I think a lot of people aren't aware of that. And I think it's something to watch out for. And I honestly, personally, I think it's a shame. If you are creating music, and I've seen people that I think are good artists and I really enjoyed their music go down this route of either getting Suno to finish or just stop creating, and you can hear a change in their musical style. Like they might have had beautiful pianos before and now like their background is like weird. It's a very Suno sound of these weird phasey pads that you hear, and they're really, really not nice, but then they've played an organic instrument over the top. I'm just stop, don't do a disservice to yourself. Like you can do it, you can create, don't follow this trend and this rabbit hole. I would much rather hear like a wholly human-made work, even if it's detuned. You forgot to tune your guitar before it, and I can hear your kids in the background. I'd much rather listen to that.
Yeah, and I think whenever people begin to do this, it takes away from the joy of collaboration. Because rather than asking someone, here, this is lacking some ear candy, could you add something to this track? You're sticking it into Suno and you're asking it to produce something that just has that signature AI sibilance that no one likes. And
I think it's the collaboration's a good point, because I think in the lo-fi community especially, if you are lacking an element, there's somebody who can play that. There's like in our Discord alone, there's amazing saxophonists, trombone players, because I think that's something that like VSTs aren't very good at, like sax sounds. There's some great guys you can reach out to on our Discord that will do it. If you don't play guitar, there's a million guitarists. We're always happy to jump on a track and just play some guitar. That's some easy fun times for us. We're happy with that. And it's the same with certain elements. Like if you're missing stuff, there's even people making free sample packs, like Ellen Hope's got her vocal sample pack out, even paid for stuff by the guy at Lo-Fi Sounds. They do some great work. These is all real stuff made by real people, and it's there. You don't need AI.
That's it. It's almost just laziness is causing us to do this. Like, we're saying that I couldn't be bothered waiting for someone else to do it. I want this done now. And it's like this impatience, this sort of sense of pride where we don't want to reach out to someone else and sort of say, I need help. And it's causing us to just go down this road of, as this term you're using, hybrid AI.
I mean, I get that. As someone who suffers from anxiety, it's sometimes hard to reach out and ask people like, hey, I understand that. But I would rather, even if you don't feel like reaching out, just make something bad. It's the whole point of none of us in the lo-fi community are getting rich. Like nobody is making lots of us have had millions of plays. We're not getting loads of money from that. We're here because the process is the point. That's the whole point of it. Like, I don't know if I'm strange to this, and you might be similar, but I love the little bits, the little decisions in music. Like a lot of the pads in my music are actually all guitars. So I take, it's usually like a 3-note arpeggio or something even within the track, and I just play around with that until I get a pad. So I like you add a ton of reverb, some granular delays, pitch shift it up and down, EQ a section out and pitch shift that around, stereo spread it. I enjoy all that tweaking, that tinkering. That's fun. Like enjoy that process.
Yeah, I think there's as much fun in the journey in producing the track as into listening the final product. And whenever you're stuck in some way, you can always learn a new method to make a sound, and you experiment and find something new that you've never tried before. And it's all part of the process.
I think that's a good point in the community as well, because I often see, especially on social media, you see people who put out AI music being like, oh, it's gatekeeping. I was like, it's not gatekeeping to not use it. Literally, if you ask any producer, like if you go into our Discord now and ask anyone, how did you create that? Especially if you ask a guitarist, what's your guitar chain? They will talk at length. I use this plugin, I use these bubbles, like EQ, like cued it like this. We'll talk for days on that stuff. Like nobody's gatekeeping. Like everybody is happy to share everything about how they create, really. And we see this with lots of the guys in the community have their own YouTube channels where they share exactly their plugins, and some people even like share like Ableton templates with all of the plugins already set up for you. I don't think anybody's really gatekeeping there.
No, far from it. And so, but thinking about like this hybrid AI, it's almost getting our ears accustomed to what AI produced music sounds like. And going slightly off topic, I don't know if you're aware with the situation that's been happening with Diodario of late, the guitar string company, right? Yes, I've been sort of loosely following the controversy there, and now I don't know if you know the guitar YouTuber Rhett Shull. Yes, so Diodario provided him with the Logic project. And he's looked through it and he said that he can't seem to find any AI used in it at all. But it seems that the person who produced the demo track for Diodario, his ears are so used to what sort of this AI sibilance that he's compressed the guitar so much and he's added so much treble that it sounds like it's been AI produced, but it's not. And
yeah, I find that weird. It's like it's its own subgenre of music now, of just AI, like tinny awfulness and like sibilance and phasey oddness, like especially in the high end. So for those who aren't aware, like I think a lot of it was trained on MP3s, which is obviously a lossy file. So the way that they compress for an MP3 is that it takes the bits that the human ear notices and recognizes, basically, and that's what you get in your audio file, and it cuts out the other stuff. So AI doesn't know that all of that like 10K up nonsense, that it doesn't know what that is, because it wasn't trained on data that had all of that in it. So it just like makes stuff up, which is a lot of what you can hear. I think if it was trained on like high quality, it may sound different, but it obviously wasn't. But yeah, the Dear Dario one was really interesting, and that did you read the long post that they put out about it? So they were talking around, but he wanted to finish it off, so he may have used like mastering software. Like, oh, come on,
they're digging a hole for themselves. Like,
yeah.
Yeah. But that's really eye-opening what you mentioned about how AI was trained on lossy audio files, and so perhaps if they were trained using FLAC or WAV files, that it wouldn't have this issue. I don't know. It's something I suppose we'll never know.
I'm not an expert, but from my understanding, I think if you went back to the start and they had all FLAC files, or at least high quality WAV files, I do think a lot of what we hear as like the AI sound wouldn't exist. But as we discussed earlier, to get all of the data, it was just stripped from the internet. So like YouTube compresses, even SoundCloud does some compression on tracks. Spotify is all compressed. So all of the stuff that they stole essentially was compressed audio. So it's not trained on like the true like the original artist's intent. So, and I do think some people are like, the high end in my hearing is not great. I'll say that. Years of like sticking my head in speakers on stage has not helped that. But I know like other guys in the scene who can just pick it out from a mile off. They can hear, especially with like high end, and like you say sibilance is one, but also like the high end on hi hats and all of the digital artifacts on that. Like that's audible that you can hear it. And I think even if it was better, like there's still going to be like, it's like an amalgamation. So it's always just going to be like, kind of like meh. We've seen this, I think it's already happening in how the models are trained, and that they're now training on themselves. So we're going to see the models getting worse almost. So I'm interested to see how that happens. I hope they get worse and go away.
Yeah. And so, yes. So, Peter, before we wrap up this podcast, maybe to end on a bit of a positive note, is there anything that you see like positive coming out of this whole explosion in AI use and it finding itself in the music scene? Is there something that we can maybe look forward to rather than be a bit pessimistic about?
Yeah, I do think they're positives. I think it's good that everybody's talking about it now. But I do think we're seeing this, and it's not just with AI. I think it's with the internet in general. I think the fact that, well, there's like the websites are getting worse, search is getting worse. It's not just generative AI in our creative fields. I think people are going to start craving human connection. I think as artists and musicians, what we're going to see is anybody who wants to like listen to music, they're going to be craving seeing people. So if you play live, that's going to be great. I think there's going to be a resurgence in people going to gigs, especially smaller shows, wanting to see those artists, not just see the artists themselves and see them performing, but being with people and enjoying it together. And I think even online, they're going to want to see more of the artist. So I think lo-fi, we tend to hide away. We don't want to be seen quite a lot of the places because we're not singing, we're not frontmen. But what we're going to see is, I think, people wanting to see that. So if you put your face out there, show who you really are, I think that's going to become more and more important. And I do think we're going to see like a positive switch. And I think this is already happening. We mentioned earlier with especially younger generations, with the like rejection of smartphones and things. I think analog itself is coming back, and people wanting like physical media. We've seen this with the PlayStation boycott, for example, and people are angry about that, getting rid of it. But in music, like vinyl sales are up, CD sales are up. People want tangible things. They want to hold things. They want human connection. So I do think there's going to be a positive in that people are going to be coming back looking for that human connection. So I think artists that can show that human connection, put their face out there, and show that authentic human side, I think they're going to be sort of the winners out of this. But I do think it's going to be really positive to see people coming back and just looking for us, saying hello, like interacting more. And I think lo-fi is an odd one that we don't play live much. I know lots of people do play sort of beat sets. Less happens in our sleepy sort of side. But I think that's going to be a real positive that comes out of it, is that human connection hopefully will come back. And I'm hopeful that people are going to be like talking more, interacting more, and hopefully I'll get to see lots more faces from the lo-fi community over the next year.
Yeah, that would be great. If through all of this, it brings us closer together as a community, makes us more like a family, and reach out to each other, make music together, make real human-made art. And to prove that we don't need this, we don't need generative AI to create something that sounds great, because, well, to be frankly, like none of it does sound great, but like, but still, yeah, that is definitely something that we can hope that happens out of this situation. And so, Cucamello, thank you so much for this interview. Thank you so much for updating us on this whole scene. Like, your insights has been fantastic. You're really well versed in things. So thank you very much myself as well, just for sharing this stuff with me and helping me to be more aware and to what to look out for.
Well, thanks for having me. And I think, as we talked about the human side, thanks for creating the podcast. I think it's really great to see other people in the lo-fi community. And I love watching back and seeing all of the other people that I've collaborated with or even just listened to on this podcast. So it's really great to see. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. And to hear that like someone listens to the podcast is the best encouragement I could ever have. So all the best, and maybe have you on again sometime in the future.
Love to. Thank you.